In Civilization 6, chopping resources is like flex tape. It can fix anything. Military chop, science chop, a failing relationship okay, maybe not. But unlike flex tape, chopping the right tiles gives you such an advantage in Civ 6 that maybe even you could get a girlfriend.
That's a lot of damage.
But the question is, when should you chop versus improve? Improving tiles that are choppable in Civ 6 are few and far between. Forests, rainforests, and bonus resources like wheat and copper are the only real decisions you have to make. But at the same time, these resources are more abundant than Fortnite dances at a bus stop. This amount of resources means that the decision becomes more important, and before asking what chops gives you, what about other improvements? Improving lets you work a Russian Olympiad level of steroided up tile with the extra yields of the resource it has. A farm gives about 2 food and 1 production on a plains tile. With a wheat tile, that's now 3 and 1, meaning it is a lot stronger than other farms. With the extra yields on these tiles, you can now get a head start on the early game in growth, production, gold generation, while still keeping these advantages until the late game, which overall could give you hundreds of yields worth of gold, production, food, etc., which can lead to, for example, 3 to 4 extra citizens than you would normally have. Add in enough of these tiles, and you'll have the population and industry of modern-day China, just hopefully without the oppression, hopefully with all the great things that China does. No doubt about it, getting resources on tiles like hills with forests are some of the best production reservoirs in the game, with an extra 1 production on forested hills being improved more with lumber mills and eventually future techs for those lumber mills. Before industrial zones, these will be large amounts of production, letting you produce damn near anything at almost the same rate as Disney live-action shit shows. So that's pretty much why you should improve better yields over the long term, which end up giving you more of that yield than when chopped over the course of a game. So why would anyone chop after hearing that? Well, chopping might seem at a disadvantage at first. You will get more of the yield by improving it instead of just chopping it, even with Magnus, but that is over the course of an entire game. Chopping forests with more vigor than modern-day Brazilian wood companies or Elden Ring scrubs will give you a large amount of that yield immediately, and that's the important part. Take America, for instance. Imagine telling this lady at the counter with this haircut that no, she has to wait a couple minutes because something is wrong with the register. To ensure the fury of 1,000 suns doesn't drop on you like a Hiroshima cosplay, you need things as early as possible in Civ 6 to be completed, just like you need to subscribe to not only get dibs on future videos, but also to get a jawline so chiseled your new pronouns are crimson. By chopping out a settler or district, you can save 5 to 10 turns per forest chop, depending on your city's intrinsic production. And that's just for production. You can save maybe 10 to 20 turns of population growth by chopping a marsh or rice tile, get more money to buy anything by chopping maize or copper tiles, and maybe even depending on the mods, you could even get production from copper or food from maize, or even science from some specifically chopped luxury resources that you can do. But even without mods, with those extra turns of making use of something, for example, 10 extra turns of another population point in the early game, you can actually get more out of chopping than what improving gives you. For example, 10 extra turns of working a 2 food, 2 production tile in the early game gives you about 20 food and 20 production. That is about halfway towards building something like an archer, and maybe even halfway or even a quarter way towards getting the next population point, which you'll get both sooner, which then you can make use of those abilities a little more earlier than you normally would, and then the snowball sort of continues, especially if you have a monstrous, disgusting tile like a 3 food, 3 production spices tile. You probably are already working that, but if you have another, you can work that second tile that just much faster. That doesn't make any sense. But pretty much you get extra turns of another unit, district, population point, and the cycle is sort of a positive feedback loop because everything you build, getting it earlier is always the better option, and that is exactly what chopping does, letting you snowball to an early advantage that the slow burn improvement doesn't give you. Not even to mention the fact that eventually you are going to be chopping 90% of all your tiles anyway, because of the fact you're going to need districts, even aqueducts, neighborhood, industrial zones, campuses, commercial hubs. The only resources you will end up keeping are the luxuries, the really super strong 3 food, 3 production resources, and anything that you literally can't even chop at that point. In the early game snowball lets you catch up to the AI very early on, and being the nice guy that I am, can then give them tickets for an exclusive meetup with every dodo bird to ever exist. And now, answering the age-old question philosophers like Socrates and Eminem have been discussing for millennia. When should you strip the world of its artificial covering like the backroom of a brothel? And when should you improve the tiles to get the best benefits possible for the entire game? First off, go into any game with the mindset of chopping everything like a 90s serial killer, because you will. As with every tile with a resource will eventually get chopped for the most part, either sooner or later. It just makes economic sense. By the time you get to the mid to late game, chopping stuff then gives a lot more yields, and since you're closer to the end of the game, will eventually be a net positive to chop, around turn 150, 200, versus keeping and working the tile. This Inca game, for example, I had a juicy marsh tile and prayed to the thick lady of the reeds and marshes for production, and so chopping this 5 yield monster tile early is stupid unless I need the tile. But I want an aqueduct there eventually, because I want an amazing industrial zone right beside it, and without the aqueduct, it just becomes meh. So, right before I place the aqueduct, I am going to chop it, because placing the district on the feature doesn't actually give you the bonus like chopping would. Apparently, if you chop it with the builder, it goes to the city, and if you just build a district on it, I don't even know where it goes, bro. Ask Sid Meier. So, every time you need to place a district, you make, like Revolutionary French, chop that shit like its name was Louis, because it probably was. Other than that, if it is on a hill tile, I would again recommend chopping it, because a mine gives almost as much production as a lumber mill on a hill, and the production from chopping will make up the difference. Food tiles like wheat and rice, it's a little difficult. On the one hand, growth is a big part of the game, and on the other, a growth is a big part of the game. I'd recommend keeping those tiles if you have few really good food tiles, but if you have some bananas and pastures or spices or anything that gives you a large amount of food, then chopping these bonus resources and letting the city grow earlier is the best option. So, to clarify, chop before placing a district, chop whenever there's a resource on a hill, and chop if you have food and production yields elsewhere and want to get things out as soon as possible. And the last thing before ending off this absolute banger of a it's probably a shit video, honestly. We got some asterisks on when you should actually look to improve versus looking to chop everything like an 8th century monarch. Number 1, you have monster tiles. If you have an absolutely disgusting, affront to God and atheists alike type of hill tile, with maybe something like gems giving you 2 food, 2 production, and 3 gold, this is assuming you have the chop luxury mod. I'm just giving this as an example. I know you can't chop luxuries in the base game. You should never look to chop that, because it will fuel your economy heavily early on. And if you get something like that, for example, a rice tile on a marsh grassland giving you 5 early game food, then I would highly recommend you keep the marsh and the rice on that tile, because while working 5 early food might not be as efficient at building things as an early 2-2 tile, you could then look to work multiple heavy production tiles without having to worry about people eating. But another asterisk I want to add is if you have no district to place on the tile, then that really means you have an opportunity to keep that tile. If you don't need a campus, if there's a better campus anywhere, you don't need anything for an industrial zone, even the government plaza doesn't make sense to put there, and it's a good enough tile, just leave it as is for a while until A, you need the resource, or B, you can improve, or towards the mid to late game, you can even chop it when it makes more sense to chop at that point. But if you have no district to place on the tile, then there really is no rush to actually do it, unless you have something like a unit district or even a settler coming out that you want as soon as possible. And that leads me to my third asterisk. If if you don't need anything right away, then there really is no point in chopping at all. Leaving the extra tiles for the extra yields is the best opportunity if you're building something like a warrior, for example, because you don't have anything else to build, because you don't want to build settlers yet, or because if you're just building something for the sake of building it, or you don't need the district right away, like it's a +1 commercial hub, then just don't chop it, all right? Keeping the extra yields will eventually be more beneficial, because when you need something eventually, then you can decide to chop it, unless you have, get something like lumber mills on jungle, and then you could wait until the late game and chop it, or even just keep it. I don't know, I'm not your dad. Stop looking to me for advice. And when in doubt, chop everything, like your first name was Ted, Jack, or Brazilian Lumber Company. Let me know down below what other new tips you might have, and leave a like and subscribe to not miss out on future videos. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.